Alrighty. Well, it looks like we have a good number of folks already with us this afternoon, and we are just a little bit past noon, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This month, the Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration will be presenting big energy across the Mid-Atlantic region. So, a hot topic, and we have a great selection of panelists from all across the Mid-Atlantic with us this afternoon. And I'm going to save introductions for Andrew, our immediate past president of the Virginia chapter. But I just wanted to run through a quick list of some housekeeping items and other logistical things. First thing to note, you'll notice that I don't have a CM number for you this afternoon. You may or may not be aware, but APA National is going through some site upgrades, and as a result, we have had some difficulties getting um, the CM certification process up and running. So we will be sure that every attendee has access to that number and those details as soon as we're able to certify it. We'll send out an email, and we'll also make sure it's posted on the APA Virginia chapter website where you can find other webinar information as well. So we really do encourage questions, but please submit your questions through the Q&A box. That will just help us keep track of all inquiries. When we enter the more formal Q&A portion, you can feel free to use the raise hand feature to request to be unmuted if you'd prefer to ask your question out loud. But again, as long as you have a question, feel free to submit that through the Q&A throughout the webinar. And you may, just because we have a number of speakers with this afternoon, you may help Andrew, our moderator, by indicating who the question is best, who is posed for. If you have any logistical questions, please feel free to DM me in the chat. I'm going to leave the chat open if there's ever an opportunity for any open-ended discussion. And you may have been notified on your screens that this webinar is being recorded. It will be shared to the MAPC YouTube page in the next couple of days, where you can find all previously recorded webinars in the series. And the slide decks will also be provided to all participants as well. So all the resources and links will be sent out in the coming days. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Andrew at this time, but thank you everyone for being with us. I think we have a great webinar ahead.
Thanks, Jillian, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. Happy New Year to everyone. This is the first Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration webinar of the year. For those of you who are not familiar, the Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration is a group of a number of APA chapters in the Mid-Atlantic region, as well as some other affiliated planning organizations who have teamed up to offer some training and webinar offerings to planners in the area that cover topics of interest and bringing a variety of different perspectives to the planners, so that we're not focused simply on what's happening in one state. And so really that's the focus of what we're here to talk about today. The Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration's theme for this year of the webinars that we're going to be offering throughout the year will be returning to this topic of big energy. And that means different things in different states. And so we're going to hear from 6 different states today related to what's going on in the field of big energy for them. To start us off, we're going to hear from Tom Noyes from Delaware. He's the administrator of Delaware State Energy Office, which is located within the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, or DNREC. And he's going to be sharing an update on Delaware's energy policy landscape. So Tom, with that, I will turn it over to you.
All right, and was coached on how to do this yesterday, so hopefully we've got this, and I need to do this part. How's that doing? Is this showing up the way it ought to?
We are still, it might just be lagging, but we're still looking at the build out.
Oh yeah, okay. Let's try. How about that?
There we go. Perfect.
Great. Um, Good afternoon, all. The Delaware State Energy Office is located within the DENREC Division of Climate, Coastal, and Energy. And it's a good place for us to be located. And I can give you a couple of examples of the synergies that that are established by locating us. One of our colleague, one of our Another section of the division is, for instance, our climate team. And our climate team just brought out the latest 5 years, actually the second and the first legislatively mandated climate action plan. So there are reasons we're located within our organization the way we are. So I'm going to do a quick overview. Now, I'm not sure I can see chat or questions. So if somebody drops a question, Andrew, if you could throw them my way. I don't intend to, I didn't prepare a lot, preferring as much as possible with the number of folks we have participating to have a conversation, not just a lecture. So, um, the DENREC State Energy Office, we do renewable energy, energy efficiency. We work on grid modernization, both the transmission and the distribution level. For those who aren't familiar with the grid, um, transmission grid is regional and is sort of like your limited access highways, whereas the distribution grid is what's on your street in your neighborhood. We do energy security. Um, we do energy security planning. We do energy justice. That's baked into everything that we do. Um, we do a lot of stakeholder engagement. We don't have a large capacity. We have not been gifted or bestowed with a whole lot of authority to just tell people what to do. Most of what we do is in collaboration with other stakeholders. We have a Governor's Energy Advisory Council, GEAC, that we staff, and that's sort of one among many energy energy stakeholder groups that we participate in, including the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, the Renewable Energy Task Force. We are participants in a legislatively managed energy stakeholder group, and right now um, we're also participating in a legislative nuclear energy feasibility task force. And which brings me to the bottom item is there's always something emerging, and this year and last is even more so. And emerging issues include nuclear, the need for load growth, the effect of data centers and other large load additions. It's mostly data centers to the grid, and how we're going to handle that. Um, how the states engage with PJM interconnection. PJM manages the regional grid that I think serves all of the states represented here. So we are guided by a state energy plan, which came out a year ago. The state energy plan was the product of 2 years of stakeholder engagement. Started with the Governor's Energy Advisory Council, which gave us a long list of recommendations. And then we took those and reorganized that into an energy plan that covers energy justice, renewable energy and clean technologies. And by the way, clean technologies can include hydrogen and nuclear. I'm not saying nuclear is clean in all respects, but it does not emit carbon. Let's put it that way. Energy efficiency and beneficial electrification. And by the way, that category includes demand response, which is even more important to us all as we see um, the prospect of sharp, unprecedented load growth. Grid modernization, which I've already mentioned, and workforce development. Um, all of these areas require somebody to do the work, and whether it's the engineers planning the grid or planning new generation, or just the need to have enough of a workforce to hook up EV chargers and high efficiency heat pumps. We need workers to make that happen. Um, Delaware, like a lot of places in the region, is looking at load growth. And in 2025, we started to see specific proposals come to Delaware for locating um, data centers. We have one large project that is formal, and we've got anecdotal stories and have not yet seen any details about some other proposals. The large one that we're looking at is 1,200 megawatts. 1,200 megawatts in Delaware is a lot. Our summer peak load, the peak load that Delaware draws on a summer evening is 2,700 megawatts. So 1,200 megawatts is 44% of our peak load, which is a huge problem. We're grappling with how to respond to that in terms of not just the engineering, but the cost of electricity for all of us and the prospect of disruption or reliability risk to all of us. And in dealing with that, we have worked with other states, with the authors of this report, which I highly recommend, a state playbook for managing data center driven load growth. The We work with the authors on a number of fronts, and they identified four key policy levers that states can use to control, to manage what happens in our jurisdictions. One is improve administrative information collection and processing of data center requests. One issue that has emerged across the region is we don't have a good handle on what the projected build out of data centers is. One reason is that somebody looking to build a data center and they're all in a hurry, um, may be looking at locations in several different states. And if that's the case, then you could have 1,000 megawatts here, 1,000 megawatts here, and 1,000 megawatts here, and that's adding 3 gigawatts of load to the total that we're seeing in PJM. So just getting a handle on how big the anticipated or at least or projected load growth is a huge thing and is not just an academic or a planning question. PJM relies on projected load growth in organizing the markets to provide generating capacity for all of us. And if the projections are not accurate, then that you could either create a risk of not obtaining enough generation, or on the other hand, it could be a risk that PJM is out shopping for more capacity than we might need by gigawatts. Um, so number two, clarify the right of utility regulators to tailor rates to data centers. In Delaware, we have opened in front of our Public Service Commission, we have opened a large load tariff docket. Now, a tariff is not the tariff you read about in terms of global trade. A tariff is not just the price of electricity, but the conditions established by a Public Service Commission or the utility, or we're going to sell you electricity in this amount at this price with these conditions. And when we have something this large coming our way, um, we decided we needed to open a special docket to look at what that tariff might look like, and that is just getting underway. Um, Three is establish substantive requirements for new requests, and this can be not just um, what they pay for electricity, but what other requirements? Are we going to require data centers to build out the transmission and distribution networks needed to serve them and insulate other electricity customers from the risks of, say, stranded assets? If we spend 100 million on transmission upgrades and the data center leaves town after 5 years, then there could be costs imposed on other electric customers. Likewise, there are other substantive requirements that can be considered. Some of them are traditional environmental planning and permitting requirements. Uh, there's a lot there. And four is a moratorium. Now, a moratorium, if for those in land use planning, know that if you've got a big new land use, and you're changing the zoning code, you can say, okay, no new applications under the old zoning code will be accepted while we adopt these amendments to the zoning code. Same thing can apply in electricity regulation, electric utility regulation. Um, and in fact, because we have opened a docket in Delaware, we have a temporary moratorium on new requests to connect new loads. So these are the four uh, key policy levers. There's a lot more. This is Abe Silverman and Susanna Glatz, Mihaela Lavas at Johns Hopkins. Um, highly recommended. And so I've already touched on some of this. First is PSC docket 250826, the large load tariff. We have two pieces of legislation that we're looking at. House Bill 233 would require utilities to establish a large load rate class that could add more specificity to the authority of the Public Service Commission to regulate the connection of new large loads. Senate Bill 205 would require a certificate to operate from the PSC. And then Newcastle County ordinance would make amendments to their zoning code as it relates to data centers. All of this is in addition to the traditional environmental permitting, also managed within our department. Now, with that, I see that we've got some questions. I'm not sure I can see the questions, so if someone could help out.
Tom, actually, in the interest of time, just because we're trying to get everybody in, you should have the ability to answer those questions in the actual Q&A forum. So if you're all set with or done with the presentation, I'll look to
Yes,
transition us.
I am.
And Julie and I can help you look to get the answers to those folks in the Q&A. But
Okay.
appreciate that perspective from Delaware. We're transition now to your neighbor in Maryland. Joe Griffiths is the Director of Planning Best Practices for the Maryland Department of Planning. In this role, he oversees the department's regional planning, local assistance, and educational efforts. And he's going to be covering Maryland's energy prices, demand, infrastructure, and challenges within both the federal and the regional context. So, Joe, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Give me a second here. Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for that introduction that explains who I am. I'm going to discuss, as Andrew mentioned, the opportunities facing Maryland within the larger regional and federal context. There will be some overlap in what Tom shared with us, so thank you for starting that up, Tom. I also want to stress that I am not an energy planner, like some of the other experts on this panel. I developed the slides in this presentation using a memo that was provided to me by the Maryland Energy Administration. I will do my best to convey their wisdom and expertise to you, but I will surely get something wrong. But like with every other state throughout the country, community throughout the country, energy is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in energy planning is, and I'm sure over the next few years, I will become more expert on this topic. Okay, So Maryland residents are facing increasing energy bills for multiple reasons. The sharply rising costs of wholesale electricity and energy infrastructure are among the main drivers. Also, a colder than average winter in 2024 and 2025 created additional demands on the system. In Maryland, utilities do not own power plants. The energy is purchased in federally regulated wholesale markets. Tom was describing PJM, or the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland interconnection, which administers these markets and is a multi-state grid operator that oversees the flow of electricity across all or part of 13 states and DC. PJM functions as the middleman between power generators and utilities, moving energy from where it is produced to where it is needed. However, PJM's market structure means that prices are directly influenced by supply and demand dynamics across the entire region. When demand surges or when there are delays in bringing new generation online, PJM must rely on more expensive, often fossil fuel-based peaker plants to meet the grid's needs. These factors drive wholesale electricity prices higher, costs which are ultimately passed down to Maryland ratepayers. In 2025, energy prices were expected to rise 7% higher than those in 2024. PJM delayed the construction of some new energy projects, and these delays contributed to an increase in bill costs. And many older power plants shut down because they were no longer making enough money to cover their costs. This happens when newer, cheaper energy sources push down prices in the wholesale market, making it unprofitable for older coal and oil plants to keep running. This also makes it harder to meet electricity demand, especially as energy use grows. Utility infrastructure costs have been steadily increasing in the U.S. This is partly a response to the pandemic and the increasing cost of materials. Maryland multi-year rate plans, which allow utilities to charge customers for projects before they have been completed, has also contributed to rising costs. Maryland's 2013 STRIDE law allowed gas utilities to replace older gas infrastructure, even if it was less risky or a non-priority pipe, which similarly led to increased costs. In 2025, the Maryland General Assembly passed and the governor signed the Next Generation Energy Act to help curb future spending in multi-year rate plans and on gas infrastructure. The new law also helps ensure that energy costs are paid fairly by future Maryland data centers with high electricity demand. The law also provides rebates to consumers in FY26 to help offset high energy bills. Another driver of cost increases is demand growth, and over the next few slides, I will discuss PJM's forecast for energy demand in its 13th state region and in Maryland, as well as calls for generating more energy within the state. PJM released its 2025 long-term load forecast late last year. In short, electric load is projected to grow dramatically from increased data center development, electrification of buildings and vehicles, and increased manufacturing throughout the PJM footprint. For example, PJM expects its summer peak to climb by about 70,000 megawatts to roughly 220,000 megawatts over the next 15 years. By way of comparison, the existing record summer peak in the PJM footprint previously occurred in the year 2006 at a level of 165,563 megawatts. However, the PJM zones within Maryland are expected to see slower load growth over the same period as shown in the chart on this slide. The expected increase in demand is largely being driven by forces outside of Maryland. Adding to the crunch for power is the fact that economically unviable resources, primarily older coal and oil fuel plants, are retiring in the state and region. Transmission upgrades may help satisfy loss of energy from retiring energy facilities by increasing the flow of power from existing generators into other areas and by enabling the integration of new energy resources like solar. Increased load growth, combined with the fact that Maryland is a net importer of electricity, has led to calls for more in-state generation. The Next Generation Energy Act attempts to address the issue by providing two things. One is a nuclear procurement mechanism to invite bids for subsidized new nuclear generation in the state that will provide a predictable and enhanced price for electricity provided by new nuclear generation assets, and a solicitation, evaluation, and approval process for a minimum of approximately 3,100 megawatts of dispatchable energy generation and large capacity energy resources for expedited certificates of public convenience and necessity. But calls for Maryland to be completely energy independent often do not fully consider what it would take to meet the demands of such a densely populated state. To be energy independent, Maryland will likely have to rely on a strategy that includes significant new nuclear energy generation. Currently, 40% of all the electricity produced in Maryland comes from Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant. To reach 100% clean energy would require maxing out our solar potential and doubling our current nuclear production. PJM's relation to state governments and its customers, as well as its backlog of requests for new generation resources, present challenges to energy development and costs in Maryland. While PJM's goal is to ensure that the system has enough power to meet demand, states have almost no voice in its operation or governance. It is controlled by the power generators, transmission owners, and utilities that distribute the power. Governor Wes Moore joined other governors in the region to call on PJM interconnection to adjust its capacity market rules and prevent unnecessary hikes in electricity costs for residents. In a letter sent to the PJM Board of Managers, the governors reiterated long expressed concerns about rising energy costs for both residential and commercial customers in Maryland, urging PJM to lower the price cap ahead of its 2026-2027 capacity auction. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro filed a complaint with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission against PJM, citing flaws in the capacity auction design that threatened to impose significant new price increases. In the complaint, Pennsylvania requests a temporary modification to the auction price cap until reforms are implemented to add new generation to the grid. Governor Moore's letter expresses support for Pennsylvania's action, aligning concerns about affordability, in addition to citing the need to ensure reliability and promote capacity. PJM has to study the impact of new resources before it adds them to the system. PJM needs more supply, but they had a closed queue for new generation resources for 3 years while they work through the backlog. Maryland and others are trying to convince them to speed up this process. Opportunities to combine resources such as solar and battery storage, like shown on the screen, are especially exciting because storage can help solar behave like a dispatchable source. Dispatchable generation refers to power sources that can be turned on or off or have their output adjusted on demand to meet electricity needs. Until the PJM queue is once again operational and reforms are in place, new renewable generation will continue to languish while awaiting interconnection. The current federal government environment and recent policy decisions are also presenting challenges to energy development and costs in Maryland. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which I'll refer to as the Act, has upended the financial landscape for clean energy investment. It significantly accelerated the phase out of federal clean energy tax credits, particularly for solar and wind projects, making them unavailable for projects that either do not begin construction within 1 year of the Act's enactment, or therefore qualifying for safe harbor, or are placed in service after December 31st, 2027. This includes both the investment tax credit, or ITC, and the production tax credit, PTC. The loss of these incentives likely means that fewer renewable energy projects will be economically viable, hindering efforts to achieve clean energy goals. The ITC is a dollar-for-dollar credit for expenses invested in renewable energy properties, most often solar developments. The Inflation Reduction Act extended the clean electricity ITC from 2022 to 2032 as a 30% credit for qualified expenditures. The Act, the Big Beautiful Bill Act, accelerates the termination of ITCs for new commercial solar and wind projects. It also includes new and expanded foreign entity of concern restrictions. The residential solar tax credit went away for owner-purchased solar generating systems and energy storage systems after 2025, which created an urgent deadline for solar homeowners and contractors. Under the Act, the 30% solar tax credit expired December 31st last year. The federal production tax credit program, used mostly for wind developments, was first applied to facilities placed in service beginning in 1994. It was extended several times, most recently through the Inflation Reduction Act. It is a dollar-for-dollar credit against the taxpayer's federal income tax liability. The Act modifies existing production tax credits by phasing down solar and wind eligibility and changing the advanced manufacturing credit to favor domestic manufacturing and exclude wind components after 2027. In addition, the Act terminated other household-level energy credits, including the Residential Clean Energy Credit and Energy Efficiency Home Improvement Credit. These credits provided incentives to homeowners for energy efficiency improvements, including insulation, windows and doors, and high-efficiency heat pumps. Both credits will not be allowed for any expenditures made after December 31st of last year. That being said, Maryland Energy Administration continues to offer many programs to promote energy efficiency and the development of clean energy in Maryland. They've also implemented measures despite the highly disruptive federal environment to help many grantees benefit from the ITC. This includes allowing grantees to leverage their grants to meet safe harbor provisions, approving as many applications as possible, given the very limited time frame I mentioned earlier, and adjusting incentive levels for some grant programs to backfill a portion of the ITC, mostly focusing on schools and local governments. They've also been promoting the Solar App Plus, which is a permitting streamlining initiative with the potential to dramatically reduce soft costs. Montgomery County, for example, is already implementing Solar App Plus, and MEA has provided grants to Prince George's County and Worcester County to do the same. Collectively, this accounts for over 40% of the residential housing stock in Maryland. MEA is also working closely with the Maryland Clean Energy Center, MCEC, to offer flexible and below market rate financing to offset some of the most expensive project capital. And the MCEC, with funding from MEA, recently established a new program to provide pre-construction and construction financing as a bridge between project inception and long-term financing. The funding will revolve, supporting scores of community solar and multifamily projects over time. Thank you. I'll be sticking around for the questions, but as I mentioned, I am not an energy planner. I recommend your more complicated questions be directed to the emails and names on the screen, who are the kind folks at MEA who provided me with this information. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'd say you did a pretty great job pinch hitting there. So thank you for sharing what's going on in Maryland there. We're going to move from Maryland and transition to North Carolina. We've got Terry Nolan joining us. Terry's a senior planner with Wake County, where she tackles long-range planning and policy issues in coordination with the county's 12 municipalities. She's going to be talking a little bit about convening local governments to share challenges and opportunities related to hyperscale data center projects. So Terry, with that, I will turn it over to you, and note that you are still muted. And at the moment, your screen, I think you need to adjust the display settings, because we're seeing the next slide as well.
Okay, how's that?
Yep, that looks great.
See me and hear me. Okay. So like the previous presenter, I would also claim to not be an expert on energy. What I can tell you is kind of the local perspective and the challenges that the municipalities in our region are having, and sort of our attempts as a county government to try and kind of create a setting for people to convene and discuss those issues. And so with that, I'll go ahead and talk sort of through what we're dealing with, which sounds very similar to some of the other presenters that I've heard from today. Multiple municipalities within Wake County have been approached by the hyperscale data center developments, where recent inquiries have ranged in the 300 to 400 megawatt range. And just, for perspective, Sharon Harris nuclear power plant, which serves our area, has a current output of less than 1,000. So we're talking a significant chunk of what our current output is and how our region is currently served. And the impacts of these hyperscale data centers are both regional and local, particularly with the energy infrastructure and grid stress. North Carolina is experiencing many of the same things that Tom from Delaware talked about with their state. And we have also an energy security plan that talks about grid stress, load growth, resiliency issues, and all of that. Additionally, water availability and consumption is an issue, because these data centers typically use water for cooling. And so that can be an additional stress for the region, as well as other concerns, including noise and economic impacts and other nuisances. So on a regular basis, municipalities within Wake County convene and talk about issues of mutual planning interest. And it was actually the municipalities that expressed an interest in the county organizing regional discussions and really just acting as a convener, and where we would provide just a platform, provide information and support, understanding that it's the individual municipalities that are going to make their own local land use decisions on annexation and zoning. So just a little bit of background for y'all. So Wake County's current population is 1.2 million, growing rapidly. This region is one of the fastest growing in the country. We're adding about 51 people per day. Most of that is migration. There are 12 municipalities within Wake County. The light tan areas that you see on the map are the areas that are in unincorporated Wake County, where Wake County has development and zoning authority. And then, the municipalities each have, obviously, their own planning and zoning authority. Additionally, there's rapid growth in the collar counties, Harnett, Johnston, Franklin, especially. It's important to note that Wake County does not own or operate public utilities. This kind of makes Wake County a good convener in this this situation, because we are essentially not competing with the municipalities for data centers. A data center might want to locate in an area that is currently unincorporated jurisdiction, but they are going to need public utilities for the water and the sewer. And so they would be requesting annexation and probably rezoning within that process. So several of these municipalities have expressed or told us that there have been inquiries from data centers, developers, entities that are interested in potentially developing a data center. The town of Apex, shown in red in the western part of the county, has actually received a formal application from a developer for annexation and rezoning. And I can touch on a little bit of what Apex is dealing with. They have been very open and informative with all of us, the county and the municipalities, about what they're going through and sort of their process in what they're hoping to request in terms of conditions. But obviously, I'm not the lead on this project, and so I can speak a little bit to how Apex is dealing with it, and how we're all kind of working together to talk through some of these more regional issues. Duke Energy serves North Carolina, or at least this region of North Carolina, as a regulated monopoly. When our staff met with a representative from Duke Energy, he expressed that they are projecting a 5 to 7% increase in load growth. And, that is basically due to a number of things, including data centers. But Duke Energy, as a public utility, expressed that they have a duty to serve. So if a data center is approved, then Duke Energy has to serve it. And I'll get into a little bit of sort of what they are trying to do as well. But it gets to that issue of different entities with different abilities or jurisdictions over decision making, and how a local decision can impact a region or a state. And there are a number of challenges that are going to be difficult for all of us to try and overcome. There are those regional impacts, like I said, where a local decision is going to have regional impacts in this hyperscale data center environment. But also just the lack of information and specificity around these development proposals. It has been expressed, by some of the municipalities, as well as even Duke Energy has been less than forthcoming with some information, and that has to do with non-disclosure agreements. With this type of development, there is a data center developer, and then the end user is a different entity. Local jurisdictions might be able to mitigate the local impacts of noise, aesthetics, through either updates to their development standards or through conditions. but it's very difficult to forecast some of those long-term needs in terms of water resources and maintenance of that infrastructure. In speaking with some staff with the town of Apex, they are asking for a lot, or trying to understand what the future needs are, based on not only this data center, but how will that impact some of those long-term issues in terms of both water, primarily water. But it's very difficult for them to have an understanding of what long-term is going to be that impact, particularly say the data center is willing to build out infrastructure to serve them, but then the town has to maintain that infrastructure in perpetuity. So there are those types of issues. And then also, this is a very quickly evolving landscape. What is the appropriate policy tool to deal with this? Water for cooling used to be a really big deal, and used to be, these data centers used to consume vast amounts of water. Well, now that technology is changing, we're hearing that they're moving towards air cooling, using less water. That increases obviously the electrical demand, but it might be better for water. Other technologies that are evolving related to water includes things like closed loop systems. Apex is discussing with this developer the use of a reuse system. So the data center would not be using potable water, but would be using reuse water. And so those types of things seem to be moving very quickly. So our task is to do our best to create some consistent expectations and processes. That means for Duke Energy to be able to help our municipalities understand sort of how Duke Energy operates and what their requirements are for these requests. And then from a water perspective, in Wake County, there are a number of public utilities within Wake County that serve the municipalities. So are there some water strategies that all of the partners can get on board with, so that when these requests do come forward, the municipalities are prepared, the public utilities are prepared, and they can communicate a consistent policy or strategy for this type of use. Related to Duke Energy specifically, they recently instituted a new policy that is attempting to, on the front end, put some things in place to ensure that that they understand what is going to be needed in terms of service, and trying to maybe weed out some of the unserious requests, some of the prospectors, by kind of requiring more. And what our hope is that from our perspective, is that we can create a document or a guidance document for our municipal partners, so that if they get an inquiry from someone, they can sort of communicate to that inquiry, okay, you got to go to Duke Energy first, and this is what Duke Energy is going to require of you. You need to go through these steps and come back to us once you understand what that is, and you're ready to continue. And so, the tool there would really just be some guidance and some information that can help with them. Desired deliverables, and the level of specificity here we're not really sure of yet, is we want to provide a unified set of tools and resources to help guide our decision makers. It would be nice if across jurisdictions there was some consistency in terms of zoning, some development regulations, or some policies, especially related to water and some of the nuisance issues, partially, to create a consistent expectation, but also, it was said by one of the municipalities, it would be nice if these requests weren't just, jurisdiction shopping. If we can kind of set a bar, that would be helpful for everyone. But we want to develop a unified framework for how these requests are evaluated and managed so that the best information can be put forward for our decision makers. Now, on the energy related side, here are some things that can possibly be regulated at the local level, either through development standards that are across the board for this use, or through conditions if there's a conditional rezoning. So types of backup energy requiring the highest level of gasoline generator or renewables, or prohibiting certain types of power generation such as nuclear. Energy storage systems such as the type of battery. Generator testing limits, that seems to be pretty much a best practice to limit the amount of testing in terms of time for testing those generators if it's a diesel power. And then, of course, placement and screening of generators to mitigate noise. What we're hearing is that the noise issue from data centers it's a different kind of noise than what most traditional noise ordinances address. The noise that is being emitted is kind of low frequency, kind of a hum. And so really there needs to be some improvements to some of our noise ordinances and how that's measured and how it's reported. Some monitoring in place that is a best management practice that is starting to become standard, or they're starting to understand what that might be. But noise is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. And then, of course, fuel storage. If it's a diesel generator, how many gallons of fuel may be stored on the property. This is a particular concern in terms of, water quality too, how that fuel is stored, how that's monitored. And then another condition that could be used is requiring an electrical load study and regular reporting from the data center. So that concludes my slide presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry. I know we have at least one question already for you in that Q&A, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at when you have a chance. We're going to move now to Pennsylvania, and we've got Kirk Stoner joining us, and he's the Director of Planning for Cumberland County, which is one of the fastest growing counties in Pennsylvania, where he manages land use, transportation, and environmental planning initiatives in cooperation with the county's 33 municipal governments. He's a member of the Pennsylvania State Planning Board, where he advises the governor on planning-related issues facing the Commonwealth. And he's going to be discussing energy concerns with new data center projects in Pennsylvania, accompanying data center regulatory challenges faced by municipal governments, and emerging Pennsylvania policies and regulations related to data center development energy use. So, Kirk, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. So I think my presentation will build a little bit on what Terry has spoken about too, because there's a lot of similarities what we're facing in our two states. So what I've titled my presentation here is Big Energy on the New Frontier. So when I talk about the new frontier, I'm going to talk about Pennsylvania as a state, and I'll get into some of the projects we're seeing in Cumberland County in particular. But why the new frontier? So planners, we love maps. I hope there's a lot of planners on the call that love maps as much as I do. Okay, so I found this map the other day from the National Renewable Energy Lab that was showing the data center infrastructure in the United States. So this map is fascinating, and one that I wish a lot of our municipalities in Cumberland County and other areas that are looking to plan for data centers had and knew how to use. So when you look at the map, it's showing the location of fiber optic lines, it's showing the location of transmission lines, and it's showing the location of existing data centers. So you start to add those three things up, you understand where the play may be. And I think when you look at Pennsylvania in particular, if we skip on to the next slide, here we are. The big cluster below us, You see everything that's going on. That's Ashburn, Virginia. Our friends from Virginia will tell you all about Ashburn. We recently visited Ashburn with one of the major data center developers that's working in our county to see firsthand what's going on with the data center issue there. And if you see and follow the infrastructure, very similar to highways and sprawl and congestion and things that we've seen in other infrastructure that we manage. In this case, if you follow the infrastructure, you can see that the new frontier, and hopefully you can see my little hand here and cursor, the new frontier is going to be in Pennsylvania. So it's no secret that we're going to see more interest in data centers in Pennsylvania, and we need to be ready. So the question is, are we ready? Well, there's projects already happening. So these big orange circles here are projects that are under development in the county or in the state, and the blue ones are projects that are completed. So again, if you go back here, little quick, this is informal GIS, okay, a little quick informal GIS, we go back. Now look, you can see that the projects are following the infrastructure. So the big circle here just west of Harrisburg, that's where we're at here in Cumberland County. It's a major project for us that we've been working with our municipality, Middlesex Township on. But what else do we want to know about Pennsylvania? We love local government in Pennsylvania. We love it. We love it. You can see it here. This is the 2,600 units of local government that are found in Pennsylvania. And you can see some of the stats. So this data is actually a little old. This is from our state planning board. We do an annual or a 10-year growth management report. So you can see that a little old here, but we are updating, 5-year growth management report, but we're updating this as we speak. We can see that a lot of our municipalities, the red municipalities on this map, have no zoning, so they have no plan, but whatever goes, right? So, and then you have other municipalities that do have zoning, but we have 2,600 different ways of doing things. Okay, so when we look at this issue on the new frontier, this is the new frontier. How are we going to do data centers on the new frontier? We're going to do it 2,600 different ways in Pennsylvania. Okay, so to me, that's a recipe for failure. That's a recipe for confusion. And distrust of a lot of our local elected officials. We've had a front row seat here in Cumberland County to it. So what's it look like? Our project here is 700 acres, it's 3 campuses, 18 buildings, 4.2 million square feet. So you can see all the details there. The 1.3 gigawatt capacity, I mentioned earlier, Harrisburg, that's the capital of Pennsylvania. That is equivalent to 7 Harrisburgs, the energy use of 7 Harrisburgs. Unprecedented. Right, so you're seeing the massive energy use for one project. The 2 campuses, they're under planning right now. We've been reviewing plans in conjunction with our municipality. We've also been working with the developer and talking to them. And the last point there, you can see that the location close to Ashburn, Virginia is one of the driving factors. So when you work on a big project like this in the land of 2,600 municipalities, 2,600 different ways of doing things, strong local will, what do you get? You get this. You get full meeting rooms. Right, you get folks coming in that they're upset, they don't like this stuff. Some concerns are very legitimate. I think Terry did an excellent job of outlining some of the concerns with data centers, and they're not unique to North Carolina or Virginia or Pennsylvania. You're going to see those concerns wherever you go. But I think the question is, how do we answer those concerns, especially in the new frontier, where this is a new land use that no one really knows a lot about, and it's coming at us quickly. So what are the concerns? So these are the concerns that we're seeing, and I've kept these concerns more to the energy spectrum here that we're talking about, less so some of the community and land use. So, we see this all the time. Is this really needed? Is this big AI? And people stand there and use their phones and tell you that they don't want big I, right? So a little contradiction there. Are they subsidizing big business? So we all love to hate big business. This is just big business. We don't need this. Where my energy rates go up. When are these blackouts going to start, right? Is it safe to live next to these large substations? Is there really going to be any energy left over for economic development? And then what about climate change? So I think with new administration, climate change is maybe going to the back burner here a little bit. Are we still thinking about this stuff? I can tell you that our residents are, and they're very concerned. But the irony of the planning reality and irony of this fact is that the local governments in Pennsylvania, the 2,600 local governments, likely the local governments throughout the other states are here, whether it be counties or other municipal governments, they don't have the jurisdiction to talk about energy in any meaningful way. And most of them have no knowledge of how this stuff works. So my staff and I, we attend tons of municipal meetings every year in pursuit of our goal here at the County Planning Commission of working with them to implement our comprehensive plan. Energy rarely comes up. You know, when I look back at my tenure, I've been here nearly 25 years. All the meetings that I've had, I can maybe count on one or two fingers, how much energy has really come up as a discussion point. Recently, that's all anyone wants to talk about, data centers and energy usage. So they're going to the local governments to complain about projects and complain about issues that are well outside of the jurisdiction of that municipality. So the public doesn't understand these issues. So then it leads to distrust of the local government, distrust of the developer, and a lot of complex issues then that we're really not getting a lot of done. And we're left with a lot of these unanswered questions. You know, will utility rates really go up? So here we have a local utility provider saying the transmission rates, okay, transmission, not the largest part of your bill, one part of it, will go down 10% with all this new large load growth that's being developed. But yet we have other studies showing now long-term, your generation, I think with the discussion of PJM, some of the issues that we're seeing with the market and the auction, they seem like they're headed up to me. So is that all due to data centers or other factors? So a lot of this is unknown. And the final point is will that speculation transform into reality? I know there's some questions that earlier. I have some personal friends that are working in the data center space, and they're saying, no way. Of all the loads that are projected, there's no way they'll all come online because there's a lot of speculation right now. So a little bit like the Wild West. And the new frontier, talking about Pennsylvania here in some respects, is that new Wild West in what we're seeing. So what's the response from municipalities? We've seen this a lot. Okay, so at the start of this whole issue, our county planning department, we wrote a white paper on data centers, put it out there, work with our municipalities to try and get good information to them, help them write some ordinances that reflected local policy that was hopefully a balance between allowing the industry, but also protecting our local communities. But what we saw was a lot of knee-jerk reactions where you just tighten up the zoning ordinance to limit or exclude data centers. One municipality, I know that they put an area where you could do data centers. When you really look at it, data centers aren't going to happen in that municipality. We have some others that have overlay zones that they're expanding these overlay zones at the drop of a hat. Whoever's asking for it, they're expanding them. So there needs to be a middle ground and a balance there to make sure that we're allowing the industry where it needs to be and where it wants to be, but we're also not burdening our communities or having negative impacts on those communities. I've also seen that some of these new frontier communities too, they're exceeding the regulatory authority. As we work with some of them on their zoning ordinances, they'll come back with things like, well, the data centers must be air cooled. Last time I checked the municipal zoning ordinances, you can't dictate how a business is going to operate. So a lot of these things that municipalities are really stretching and reaching to figure out and really try and protect themselves of regulations that really exceed their authority. And in turn, I think in many cases that they're restricting the expansion of necessary infrastructure. My opinion, I think that data centers are necessary infrastructure in our nation. And I think that we have a national security interest too of making sure that that data remains here. So we need to look at it from that standpoint of figuring out if it's necessary infrastructure. We need to make sure that there's a place for it and it's done right. And it's done at the appropriate scale. And that scale in Pennsylvania is not at 2,600 municipalities. I've seen parochial public engagement too, where folks are saying, hey, we only want to hear from the residents that live in this municipality of 7,000 people. Well, the residents of that municipality clearly have an interest, but so do the surrounding municipalities whose water supply, electric rates, and other things may be impacted by that data center. So we're really in Pennsylvania, I think we're really struggling with this on the new frontier, that this issue is so big and we're trying to manage it at such a small scale. So what do we need? And we need a state energy plan. So Governor Shapiro in January of 2025 released the Lightning Plan. This is a comprehensive energy strategy. It's looking at energy production in the Commonwealth, creating jobs and lowering consumer costs. This was a great first step. So our governor is moving ahead. He's very energetic. You can see some of the other presentations. He's really working on a lot of fronts to get Pennsylvania back in this energy game in a meaningful way. Also includes a task force to work between state agencies, utilities and PJM. Another great move. But again, this issue isn't at the scale of an individual municipality. It's much larger, and our state is recognizing that. So this is a legislative agenda that our governor is working on. We've already seen some early implementation of that. Keep your eye out. I think you'll see more good things coming from the Lightning Plan. Second piece we need is consumer protection from the PUC. This is where a lot of our residents' concerns are at. What will happen? Well, we don't know, right? And municipalities are not in the business of setting rates or working to protect consumers with their rates. So there's a tentative order. This is just new stuff. So there was a tentative order from our PUC for model tariffs for large load customers. It was published in November. It's currently under review. You can see there what exactly it says. We could probably do another whole hour just on that, but keep an eye on that. I think this is also modeled after examples in Ohio, Indiana, and West Virginia. So I think we're all coming to the same conclusion, like, hey, there needs to be some oversight on some of these things. And finally, more energy. You know, if all this stuff is going to come to fruition, even if it isn't, we need to start talking about energy, because when you get back to the base level, what's the common root cause? It's generation. We need more energy. So for Pennsylvania, that may mean we need to tap into our Marcellus Shale or Utica Shale resources in more detail. That's not popular, especially with some of the climate change issues that are out there, but it's the reality. The reality is if we're going to need some more generation, as a Commonwealth, we may need to start looking at those resources and how we can practically use them to boost generation and address the demand that's coming. And on-site generation is another one too, where if these data centers are coming, we've seen it, many are bringing their own generation. So again, in the new frontier, then we're going to have 2,600 different opinions on whether or not they can bring generation to a development. I think that we need to think a little bigger on this to make sure that if someone is bringing their own generation, it's done right, it's done appropriately, so it's not pulling other energy from the grid that we use for other uses. So what are those new frontier governments? What do they need upstream? When I say upstream, it's higher levels of government. So I think they need leadership, especially from the state and multi-state organizations. We need to clearly identify and substantiate what those energy policy priorities are. Be very clear about them. We also need to protect the consumer and the business interests. So again, this is the balancing act, but we need that leadership from the statewide level. And this coordination with PJM is essential. You know, trying to figure out what are we going to do? Is the demand that's out there, is the demand that's in the queue, can we meet that? And we need financial resources. So if we're going to make all this happen, how are we going to upgrade the grid? How are we going to make sure that local resources aren't compromised as part of this process? So I think those resources from the state are really important. We also need information. And this is one of the key things that I've seen. There's such a lack of information out there. What does the big energy picture look like? So if I go out here off the street and pull somebody off the street and say, tell me about PJM, they don't know, right? But they'll go to a public meeting and complain about energy, right? We need to change that. We need to try and engage our residents and teach them about this. We need to provide unbiased data on the impacts and benefits of data centers and energy projects as a whole. So our planning department, on January 20th, we have a public forum that we're hosting for our residents to talk about data centers. We've built it as an objective way to learn about data centers. Shortly after advertising, we checked this morning, we're well over 200 applicants or 200 registrants already. There's a demand for this because people are getting sick and tired of going to hear a development proposal and they feel it's biased, or going to their municipal elected officials and trying to ask for answers that the municipal officials simply don't have. So that information is really important. And if we're getting that upstream, to make sure that we're all on the same page of what this means. We also need this innovation and best practice sharing as well. There's innovation out there for water use, for noise, for energy use. We need to know what they are so that when a developer comes to town, we're discussing them with it. And if a developer is proposing that our residents aren't pushing back saying, well, that's never going to work. We need to figure out the best ways to do these things and make sure that they're enabled and not prohibited with our local ordinances. Final piece here, this isn't popular, especially in states like Pennsylvania. There's a lot of local government. We need practical preemption. So when you look at 2,600 ways of doing things, it's not going to work on these major issues like energy and data centers. So we need to make sure that these major projects, whether it be energy or data centers, they're enabled in the right location. The map that I showed earlier, there's right locations for these things. We need to make sure that they're located there in the right location and not spread out all over the place. Okay, so again, that takes a little state preemption, not popular, especially when we're talking about 2,600 different ways of doing things and attitudes on land use. It's a big ask. We also need to expedite the approval process. So 2,600, if you'd have an application for a data center in our 2,600 municipalities, you'd have 2,600 different deadlines on when that's going to get done. It may be a permitted use in some municipalities, takes 3 months. In other municipalities, it may be a conditional use. It takes 2-3 years if it ever gets done. So we need to figure out what's an appropriate process that balances the business and economic development interests along with the interest of protecting our communities and our quality of life. And in some instances, we need to retain that applicable local control. Terry mentioned a few things that municipalities regulate. Absolutely, they should continue to do so. But we shouldn't put issues in their hands that they may be incapable of doing, or maybe a pay grade or two above what they really should be doing. making sure that we have that coordination between the levels of government to carry out those major statewide policy priorities. Final piece I'll leave you with this is planners. I know there's a lot of planners out there. What do we need to do? And this was something that we had presented at our statewide conference this year. The title of it was Big Energy, What You Need to Know, What You Need to Do as a Planner. So I hosted the panel. We had the PUC chairman on our panel. We had somebody from PJM and we had somebody from PPL as a local utility, and we discussed these issues. And these were the things that were the takeaways, I think, from that. As planners, we need to learn about what's going on the energy sector. It's our responsibility. A lot of people aren't doing this. We're looking out for our communities. We need to know this stuff. And then we need to share that information, educate our residents and others around us that are in that decision-making process, whether it be advising lower levels of local government or working with the higher levels of government to bring some of that information down. And then that advisement piece. So, Terry is much like in Cumberland County or in Pennsylvania, we may not have land use authority, but we have a very important consultation and advisory responsibility to our municipalities to do that. Advise of courses of action, advise of information that they can look at to make good decisions. And finally, participate. We need planners involved in these issues to make sure that the right answers are out there and make sure that economic development, business interests are promoted, but our communities are protected. So I'll leave it at that. Look forward to other questions in the chat.
Thank you, Kirk. Yeah, you certainly have some waiting for you already. So gonna have to get those fingers typing. Do make sure that you are putting your questions in that Q&A. We're going to likely run tight on time here in terms of the presentations through the end. So make sure to try and get your questions answered, that you do put them in that Q&A, and we'll do our best to try and answer them all. I'm now going to be turning it over to Eldon James and Virginia. Eldon is the registered lobbyist for the Virginia chapter of APA and has over 30 years of dealing with Virginia's General Assembly, hence the white hair. He's going to be sharing Virginia's experiences with siting agreements for utility scale solar projects. So Eldon, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, for the sake of my neighbor to the west, Jesse, we're going to try to make up a little bit of time here. I'm not going to talk about data centers. You can infer whatever you want about data centers as we go through this, and you'll have the opportunity. Virginia's solar siting agreement legislation passed in 2020 and subtitled Helping Everybody Get to Yes. In 2020, Virginia passed the Clean Economy Act, set real hard goals for carbon reduction. Nobody even knew what data centers were when that was done. Needless to say, there are issues arising. But at the same time, this little piece of legislation passed, and it was mainly championed by some rural legislators, and it was modeled on legislation from 20, 25 years earlier on host siting agreement authority relative to landfills. So what did we do? Now, Virginia is a strict construction dealing rule state. So unless the General Assembly puts something in the code that says localities can do fill in the blank, they can't. They have no authority. So starting out with definitions, you see focused in on storage facilities as well as solar facilities, even though there wasn't much of anything going on relative to storage in 2020. And then define the host locality. Basically, is the locality where any project is proposed. Okay, authorizing negotiations. Any applicant for a solar project simply writes a letter to the locality and says, hey, we want to engage in a host agreement negotiation. And then they have to agree to sit down and meet and discuss. The siting agreement can include terms and conditions on addressing the financial compensation to the host locality. That would address capital needs set out primarily in the capital improvements program for the local government. And a CIP is required in Virginia. Some do better at it than others, but it is a required element. The powers of the host locality, they can hire consultants to help them figure out the project from the locality's perspective. They can meet and discuss and negotiate the siting agreement with the applicant, which sounds like duh, but again, we're strict strict construction Dillon rule state, you got to tell us we can do it. Then to enter into the siting agreement with the applicant, and that's in binding on the governing body of the host locality and enforceable against future governing bodies of the host locality. Then further powers, if the parties in the siting agreement agree upon terms and conditions, the you then set the schedule for a public hearing, which would be a standard very similar to a land use public hearing in other circumstances. The siting agreement shall continue in effect until amended, revoked, or suspended. Um, the now the the applicant is not by signing this agreement, they're not exempt from any other approvals, whether they be local, state, or federal. They still have to comply. Now, the assumption is if the locality has signed a host siting agreement, they've already gone through the process to figure out conformance with the local other local ordinances and regulations. It's a way of creating a partnership from the beginning, and remembering they can contribute in order to compensate the host locality. They can contribute to anything in the capital improvements program. So if the capital improvements program calls for a new HVAC system for the high school, the applicant could offer to pay for it, and that's totally legal. Then let's see. Let's keep moving here. Okay. It is assumed that if you've gone through this process and you've held your public hearing, you have satisfied the requirements under Virginia Code, which is 15.2.2232, for conformance with the local comprehensive plan, because the local governing body has gone through a process of negotiating an agreement. If that negotiation falls apart at the end, and the applicant decides to go through a more traditional rezoning or a special exception process for approval, the governing body can use the fact that they couldn't come to agreement as a reason for denying the rezoning. Can't be the sole reason, but it can be part of the reason. Basically, folks, this is a pretty broad authority, and the idea was sit down, work out what makes sense from the developer standpoint, what makes sense from the local government standpoint, the community standpoint. You engage the public through your public hearing process that everybody's used to relative to land use decisions in Virginia, and try to get to yes. In 2023 and 2024, the Rappahannock River Basin Commission was asked to do a look in the basin about the impact of utility scale solar. And a couple things that they found along the way was that the importance of this legislation really in empowering localities to negotiate directly with solar developers. Pardon the typo. It was only one solar developer, not with solar developers twice. But then the study further found that the siting agreements offered flexibility in addressing community-specific needs, from conservation initiatives all the way to revenue guarantees. The agreements really allowed tailoring the solutions that benefit both the developers and specific localities. One particular locality within the Rappahannock Basin, that what they said they wanted to provide solar power for all the schools in their school district, and the solar developer agreed to it, thereby holding down a fixed what would have been an ongoing operating cost for the local school board on into the future. With that, I'm going to conclude this, and I'll be prepared to try to answer some questions. And with that, Andrew, I'm going to give Jesse some time.
Thank you, Eldon. Yeah, we're going to be transitioning to last, but very certainly not least, Jesse J. Richardson Jr., professor of law at West Virginia University College of Law, who's going to be covering for us a variety of energy issues in West Virginia, including data centers, solar energy, and state preemption of local regulation of energy and data centers. So, with that, Jesse, I will turn it over to you to wrap us up here.
Thanks, Andrew. And West Virginia is very different from the other states that we have heard from today. I should have titled this presentation, Come On Down. And when you hear about our preemption, you might be surprised. I'm going to talk, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'll keep it brief. We're going to talk about preemption and data centers and microgrids and a little bit about solar concerns in West Virginia. So in recent years, I mean, the word in West Virginia is preemption. The state legislature has preempted local governments in a variety of ways in recent years, mostly counties, but when it comes to data centers and some other issues, municipalities are also preempted in many ways. We've also had some court decisions, and the overlying attitude in West Virginia is that the state legislature wants data centers to come to West Virginia as a form of economic development. So in 2025, the state legislature amended the Economic Development Act. So yeah, it's economic development for us. And what was the high impact industrial business expansion program became the certified microgrid development program. And it explicitly talks about using microgrid districts to attract businesses. The businesses get special rates for electricity or power within the district, and the generators get some exemptions from regulation. I'm going to focus on the data center provisions, and it focuses on high impact data centers, 90 megawatts or higher of critical IT load. And the preamble to this legislation, you have to read it. It's pretty amazing. Um, it says, and I should have put quote marks around this next bullet point, quote, West Virginia is strategically positioned as the best location in the United States for data centers. We're close to DC and the majority of the nation's population. We have low tax rates. We have the least restrictive regulatory environment. And don't worry about energy or water or natural resources. We have a lot of all of those. And we have a skilled and loyal workforce. The statute also goes on to say that the concentration of data centers in China, and it calls out Loudoun County, Virginia, Eldon and Andrew. So we're looking at you, Loudoun County. Having all of those data centers concentrated in those areas is a national security risk. So we need to get more microgrids and data centers in West Virginia. It's the best place for that. And then the legislation goes on to make abundantly clear that local governments have absolutely no authority to regulate these data centers. First, the legislature says we intend to occupy the field. That's a legal term to say we're preempting local governments. Then it has very detailed provisions that preempt local government regulation of microgrids or data centers. No zoning, lighting, land use regulation, building permitting, or licensing by local governments. And the statute says local government has no legal jurisdiction over data centers or microgrids. Now, they do have to pay taxes, and they are subject to the building code. But the statute emphasizes that they also are entitled to police and fire protection, some of the benefits. Now, those taxes, though, that's controversial. There are some special provisions on how we value these data centers. And what really stings for the local governments is they don't get any of the money. The statute says that any money that's collected in taxes from these data centers, 60% goes to reduce individual income taxes. So I guess I should be happy about that. 15% to an economic development fund, 15% to the electric grid stabilization fund, and 10% goes to general state revenues. So the state has taken over regulation of data centers and microgrids in the state of West Virginia. Real quickly, back in 2023, the Intermediate Court of Appeals also ruled that local governments have no authority to regulate the location of oil and gas facilities. It appears from the decision that the only thing a local government can put in their ordinance about oil and gas production facilities is you must comply with the state law. This decision has been appealed to the West Virginia Supreme Court. It has been almost 2.5 years, and the court hasn't done anything yet. So we don't know what's happening with that, if there are some politics going on there or what. Last but not least, solar facilities. Only about 6 out of the 55 counties in West Virginia have zoning. So we're kind of the opposite of Pennsylvania in a lot of ways. If a solar producer wants to locate in one of the counties that doesn't have zoning, obviously they can do whatever they want. Even if zoned, there are some concerns that the very broad right to farm provisions in West Virginia might prohibit any zoning anyway. And that's a long story for a later day. We do have a large number of solar leases in some of our counties. A lot of concern about agriculture in those counties, and a lot of concern about will the county be able to regulate these? Because this is a county that has zoning and it has a lot of agriculture. So we will see. The other really interesting thing is that the neighbors of these proposed facilities are being offered huge amounts of money to keep their mouth shut and not object to these solar facilities. So things are interesting in West Virginia. With that, I will stop, and we do have just a couple minutes left for questions. So back to Andrew.
Thanks, Jesse. Greatly appreciate it. As I said, our panelists have been doing a pretty good job of answering those questions in the chat. Let me see if I can see any that we haven't gotten to yet that we can pose to a certain individual. Jesse, since you just spoke, actually, well, I see you're typing an answer, but the question about the lack of protections in West Virginia, do you want to quickly address that one to the broader group?
Yes, and this is one of those rare occasions where a lawyer has a short answer. Yes, it's concerning. And particularly in Tucker County, West Virginia, they're very outraged about this. It appears that a data center was in the works in Tucker County before the legislation was passed, So yeah, it's concerning. The local governments have absolutely no say in what happens. And so I don't know if there's a possibility to have the legislation changed, but yeah, we are concerned in West Virginia.
Appreciate it. David raises a really interesting question. We've got a number of folks here who have some experience with data centers, and including myself, where we have several here in my jurisdiction. But his question was, are there any significant efforts to co-locate data centers with appropriate land uses that could take advantage of the waste heat generated by the data centers? And from my experience, I'm not aware of any, but it really does pose an interesting question. And so I ask if any of the other panelists have heard of anything or had any experience along those lines. Taking a silence, or Terry, did you want to jump in?
I have not.
Not aware of anything in Virginia.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything here in North Carolina. It's an interesting topic, though. It seems like some of the factors that are influencing location has to do more with transmission lines. And for the proposal that I spoke of briefly, the proximity to the sewage treatment plant in order to install a reuse water system. But it is interesting.
Yeah. Again, I know we've got a couple other questions that are unanswered here, but in the interest of everyone's time, I'm actually going to take these last couple minutes just to turn it over to Jillian to share any last administrative comments that we have. I know we've had questions about CM credits come up again, and so if you just want to share again with everybody what's going to be happening on that front. And again, before we do that, one last thank you to all of our presenters. There was a lot of information that was thrown at you. We will also, I believe, be sharing contact information. So if you do have follow-up questions, you certainly can reach out to everybody. And thank you all for taking the time to join us for this first session. And with that, Jillian, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their expertise. And I'm glad that we were able to get to so many questions as we multitasked throughout the presentation. But I know that if you have, I know we had some leftover questions, and if you think of anything in the days to come, I know all of our speakers have expressed that they're willing to be a resource. And so their emails will be provided to attendees. We'll also be sure to send out the recording link. And regarding the CM number, just a reminder that APA National is undergoing some upgrade, or they're conducting some upgrades to their website, and as a result, we haven't been able to access our normal CM certification page. And so this webinar will be certified, but we will have to provide that information to all attendees in the future. And as soon as we have that, we will be sure to get it to you. But again, all previously recorded webinars are on the MAPC YouTube page. And so if you want to share this webinar once it's posted with your network, we would appreciate that. And I'll just say thank you again to our speakers, and feel free to contact APA Virginia if you have any questions about the webinar series.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.